So next, we're going to make our Go server actually do something useful in this inertia middleware function. And what we're going to do is make it render a very simple HTML template. So let's start by actually adding this HTML template that we're going to render. So what I've added here is a file called app.html. This is going to be our template that will eventually populate with dynamic content. But for now, it's just going to say hello world 2. And we're going to get our middleware to render this. So what we want to do now is get our inertia middleware to load up this template so it can render it. To do that, we're going to have to load the file, and we want to have some structure to us loading this file. So what I'm going to do is create a new inertia info object that's going to store this file once it's loaded, so we can then render that later. So what I've created here is called a struct in Go, and it's kind of like an object in JavaScript. And what it has is a number of fields, and the field that we care about so far is just going to be a page template, and its type is a pointer to a template file. So once we've loaded this app.html, we're going to store that in this inertia info struct. To do that, we're going to create a function that will register our middleware and go about loading that file. So I'll just run through what this function does. So I've created a new function called register inertia adapter. It takes an echo instance, which is a pointer to an echo instance. We create an inertia info struct using the new function. And then here we're going to load the HTML app.html template file and parse it into a template. Go supports multiple return values. So here we get the template and an error flag. I'm not really handling errors properly, so I just check. If there was an error, I just stop the program and report that error. And if it was successful, we continue, and I set the template in the inertia info page template field. So now that we have our register inertia adapter function defined, what we're going to do next is make our inertia middleware be able to render this app.html file. So to begin with, we'll start by making sure our register function is called, and then we're going to make sure that our inertia info struct is the renderer for this echo instance. So if you check the echo documentation, it specifies that you are able to do custom rendering by implementing this echo.renderer interface. And to implement this interface, you need to have a struct that has a type on it of a pointer to a template, and then you need to have a render function that runs taking in that type. So here this interface takes a writer, a name, some data, and an echo context, and then you return what needs to be rendered. Now we'll finish off implementing this interface. So we can see our inertia info object partially implements this interface. It has a pointer to a template type on its struct, but we're missing this render method. So what we're going to do is copy this and add it as a method for the inertia info struct type. So this render method is now going to operate on a inertia info struct. So what we've done here is added a render function to the inertia info struct type. It operates on inertia info pointers. It takes a writer, a name, some data, and an echo context. We've created a variable called render data, and that is basically a map of strings to any other type. This is basically how you would represent JSON in Go. This is the equivalent. And then what we're going to do is call the execute method on this page template type. So what's going to happen is this is going to take the page template that we loaded here into our inertia info struct, and then it's going to call execute on that. It will pass this render data into the template, so then the template has access to whatever is in this variable. The last thing we need to do now is to make our root handler call this render method. So if I jump back to our main.go file, what we want to do here is have this use the custom renderer instead of returning a string. So I'm going to start by creating a data variable. And again, this is a type that represents JSON. So the data we would want to pass into the page is just going to be a key value mapping. And then we're going to call the render method on our echo context. So what we've done here is created a data object that's currently empty, and then we call render on our echo context. So we're going to pass in a status of OK. We're going to pass in the name of the page or component we want to load. We're not actually doing anything with this at the moment, but we will use it as we go along. And then we're going to pass in that data object that we created. What this is going to do is call the render method that we defined earlier here. It's going to pass in this argument as the name, and then this argument as the data. The context is automatically injected, and the writer is automatically injected. Here, since our page template doesn't currently use any variables, it's just going to render whatever is in app.html. The last thing we need to do is to make sure that our inertia info object is set as the renderer for our echo instance. And we want to do that in our register inertia adapter. So if we step back a bit, we can see this is how the inertia middleware starts. It runs and then it calls this adapter function, passing in our echo instance. So this is that echo instance that was passed in. And what we want to do is set the renderer to our inertia info instance. I'll give that a save. I'll restart my dev server and then give it a look. Now we can see that we have Hello World 2 being displayed, which is what is in our template file. If I was to change this number and give that a save, restart my dev server, and refresh the page, you can see this is now rendering our template.